Hi theory students. In this videocast, we're going to cover the last part of chapter 15 and we'll talk about root progressions beyond what we've covered already. We'll be talking about how to do the simplest voice leading for all the root progressions. We'll talk about the role of mediant or three chords in major and minor modes. And we'll talk about parallel 6/3 chords. First, a how-to for the simplest kind of voice leading when we have root position chords either by fifth or by third or by second. So here's the technique. The first thing to observe is the common tone rule. When we have a root progression by fifth, there's one common tone between the two chords. When we have a root progression by third, there are two common tones between them. And by second, there are no common tones between them, and it's true whether we're ascending or descending. So here's the technique now, and I'll show it to you in a second. You keep any common tones in the upper voices. You move the remaining upper voices by step to the nearest chord tones. When we have no common tones, the upper voices all move in contrary motion to the bass. Let's see how this works here. So now we have a root progression of a descending fifth in D major when 5 goes to 1. So let me fill in the 5 chord. The note that's in common between the 5 chord and the 1 chord is D. I beg your pardon, A is the common tone. So we keep A there. We move the C sharp up and the E up. So now we have a complete 1 chord that follows. It sounds like this. Next, in the descending third progression, we have a B minor chord, and that shares 2 notes in common with the G major chord that follows, the B in the soprano and the D in the tenor. So we'll keep both of those. The remaining voice, F sharp, goes up to double the root. And it sounds like this. And finally, the case where we have no common tones at all between the 4 chord and the 5 chord. So in this case, we'll write in the G major chord. And now when 4 goes to 5, the bass is going up, so the upper voices will all go down. Down to where? To the notes of the 5 chord. Like that. There are other configurations we could use if we want different soprano lines in each case. But this is the simplest kind of voice leading, where we keep the maximum number of common tones and move the remaining voices as little as necessary. Next, we're talking about mediant chords, or three chords. They're not very common, especially in major keys they're not very common. And here's where you may find them. The three chord can sometimes expand the tonic, and it operates a lot like a 1/6. Sometimes what appears to be a three chord is sometimes a 1/6 with a passing tone from 1 to 7, scale degrees that is, or it can sometimes be a 5 chord with an embellishment of scale degree 3 to scale degree 2. I'll show you what I mean. In this case, in the key of B flat, here's a 1 chord that might normally go to a 4, and now when we expand it, and on to 5. What appears to be a passing tone A really forms D, D, F sharp, F and A, which makes for a 3 chord, but it works a lot like a 1/6, and we'll go to the predominant E flat. In the case on the right, is this a 3/6 or is it a 5? It's certainly a dominant function, and it's as though the D's an embellishment. Sometimes composers even leave the C out altogether, and will go right from that apparent 3/6 to a 1. But clearly it's functioning as a dominant, one way or another. In minor keys, 3 very often has a more important role than it would have in major keys. And that's because the 3 chord in a minor key is also the tonic of the relative major. So for example, in the key of C minor, 3 is E flat, and E flat is the relative major of C minor. So that means that the 3, 6, and 7 works like 1, 4, and 5 in the key of the relative major, and can interrupt the tonic expansion before moving to the predominant. Remember that 7 here is built on the subtonic, not the leading tone. Let's look at the example. Here in C minor, we'll establish the key first, and now we'll have this little excursion as though it's in E flat. And now back to C minor. So this bit over here, 7 to 3, 6, 7, 3, it's almost as though we're lifting a little progression out of E flat, but then we go from there to the predominant in C minor, the F minor chord, and then the dominant chord, the G major chord. So here, 3 is used as a kind of contrast to 1. The last part of the chapter talks about parallel 6/3 chords. They're sometimes used in three-voice textures because when they're in first inversion, they can move in parallel without having parallel fifths. The root progression does not work like a chain of seconds. It's more like a progression from the first chord of the chain to the last. I'll have to show you an example to illustrate how this works. Over here in this example in D major, imagine that we have a 1 chord to a 1/6, and now we move in parallel 6/3 chords. We come out of those parallel 6/3 chords to arrive on the dominant. So here we wouldn't say that we have root progression of descending seconds 4 times in a row. What we would say instead is the beginning of this chain, the 1/6, connects to the end of the chain, the 4/6, and it's just this parallel motion that gets us from the 1/6 to the 4/6. So now it's just a tonic, expansion, predominant, and we arrive on the dominant. Chains of parallel 6/3 chords are a fairly common technique. And that's the lesson for today.